but hold it at eye level or at chest level or at neck level or anything sort of around there. But actually, when you're photographing something quite low like this, you have to kind of change that expectation, change that location to alter that perspective somewhat. So thank you. So we've got a little bit of lean going on. What else are your thoughts? What else do we think is really quite poor about this picture?
Badly framed on the left-hand side with the extra guide of brickwork. You can't seem to compose it as you would with a SLR.
Yeah, absolutely, Mick, and thanks for that as well, because that's exactly what I found. It was just too wide. It didn't matter what I did, I got stuff in that I didn't want to have in the image, and it just, you know, I'm a relatively decent photographer. I'm not world class, but I'm a relatively decent photographer. Getting this, I kind of thought, this is just rubbish. It's just a waste of time. And the other things that really jumped out at me, it's crooked as well. And if you've done any mobile photography, because it is so ultra wide and it's really dependent upon where you position it on your person, it's really, really easy to get slightly crooked images. Slightly crooked images when you're looking at such an ultra wide perspective are significantly more unbalanced. So yeah, we've got somebody on the left-hand side that's interrupting. We've got the top that's tilting. We've got the walls that are leaning as well. And actually, and I look back at this now and I'm unpicking this, sorry, more so than I probably thought, but I also think we've got a bit of pin cushioning going on. I think the actual picture itself looks like it's pulling in at some point, sort of towards the middle. So not by any means any kind of high quality image. And we'll revisit this. We'll come back, sorry.
Would you just change your position then?
Well, that's interesting. I think in hindsight, Sheila, that's a really good question. I think in hindsight, I would have probably knelt down to the same height that he is.
And move in a bit closer.
Oh, now moving in closer. I totally agree. When one of the things I've experienced when I'm moving closer, because I'm not afraid of getting close to people, maybe not at the moment, but I'm not afraid of getting close to people. One thing I have noticed is that the distortion that can sometimes occur on people's bodies when you get very close is quite pronounced. So there's an example I've got just before playtime, just before break, before we have a quick break, whereby I have actually got really close to someone, but the incredible distortion on their body is a nice effect, but it depends upon whether you're going for that sort of level of distortion or not, or you're going for that kind of effect. But yeah, absolutely, maybe get closer, maybe sort of change your perspective, and make the sort of wall on the left-hand side, getting closer would have helped with that as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't know about with iPhones, because I don't know anything about them really.
Oh, well, this is not an expensive phone that I was using. It's quite a mid-range phone, but to be honest, I think anything that's a reasonably priced phone has got a good piece of photography, a good piece of what's the word, glass on there. You know, you've got some good lenses on some of these phones. Okay, left-hand side, so right-hand side then, slightly different kind of view. It's nighttime. Well, it's not nighttime. It's darker. So it's where I work. So I work at the university in Canterbury, and as such, no one is allowed. Security will stop you on the door if you walk in with a proper camera. Everybody's got mobile phones. Nobody thinks to check. So I was walking around for 2 or 3 hours taking photographs, and I took this picture. But I want us to go through again what's wrong with it, okay? And we've only got one more picture after this, and then I'm going to look at sort of what I produced from them, and I'd like your opinions on that as well. But on the right-hand side, what's wrong with that picture? What are your thoughts?
Well, I personally, I wouldn't have that bottom lining that is split. I would cut that right off and just use the top.
Yeah. So again,
into the top room.
So again, too much focus, too much in the image, perhaps. Yeah, too much going on there. Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Yep. Sorry, I thought that was somebody else coming in. So yeah, so apart from a bit of crop, maybe not a great deal else on that one, perhaps. Okay, and I'll come back to how I edited that one as well. And my edits.
I'd like to add for that picture, Mark.
Sorry?
If you had people, I'd like to add, if you had people on the bottom rather than just empty tables on the bottom, I would have liked the juxtaposition of people and people on the bottom. The fact that the top has people and the bottom lacks people, to me, I agree, the bottom distracts rather than adds.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And ultimately with photography, whether it's mobile phone or any kind of photography, if it doesn't add, it detracts, you know, and if it doesn't add to the image, get rid of it. But equally, when you're looking at this, so this is a straight out of camera shot. Thank you, by the way. This is a straight out of camera shot. And the thing that is discouraging to me as a photographer is that when I look at that, I think, you know, there's so much going on there that it's actually just too much for me. I don't necessarily think that's a good image. And again, I'll come back to that one. I'm going to put all three back on in a second as we go through them. And then this one is actually, again, one of the very first pictures I took with my mobile phone. And this is directly opposite the train station, the railway station. Now, I hope you can kind of see what I was going for there. And since I've been looking, it's interesting looking back on these pictures. Since I've looked back on this, I've actually identified that there are 2 or 3 other sort of smaller pictures going on in there. But rather than asking you what's wrong here, I'm going to tell you what I went for. So I went for the man in the middle, okay? Because there's a tiny bit of graphic behind him, which I'll show you in a second, tiny bit of graphic behind him. And it just really sung out at me that he was doing something. He had a slightly disheveled look on his face. It's the homeless shelter in Canterbury, slightly disheveled look on his face. And then he had this pig behind him that was flying due to some balloons. And so this is the kind of first time that I've used mobile photography in this kind of way to sort of capture something like this. There is no circumstance that I would have taken a proper camera out to photograph this, because I don't like taking photographs of people who are vulnerable, but equally I don't like people to see that happening. I think it's kind of quite belittling as well. Crystal's just said in the chat was whether it's a Banksy. I don't know. Could very well be. I don't know. It hasn't got any covering on it, so it may not be. So yeah, so we can't get up to people very closely. So I took these pictures home, tried to load them on Lightroom. If you've ever tried to load mobile phones to Lightroom, it can take quite a long time. It can be quite disappointing. It's difficult with wires and so on. And I didn't actually get on with them. I didn't really edit them that much. So when I did sort of decide to download Snapseed, and Snapseed is my kind of weapon of choice for mobile photography, and I'm going to go through some Snapseed editing later, I realized that the images weren't going to be perfect. They weren't going to be as good as I would get from my camera, and I had to come to terms with that. I had to make peace with the fact that the images were probably going to be inferior in some way. And so I had to sort of respect the fact the editing was different too. So I installed Snapseed and had a little bit of a fiddle with some of these pictures, but actually did them as an intermediate measure. So I used Snapseed and then said, oh, okay, that's what it could look like. Now I'm going to go back onto my proper computer and then see what I can do in proper software. Once I'd done that, and I'd done it about 4 or 5 times, I realized that Snapseed gave me pretty much exactly the same stuff as Lightroom and Photoshop. Didn't have quite the same level of control as you would on a proper computer, but I ultimately had really similar outcomes. So I did things that you're not supposed to do to mobile photographs. I cropped mobile photographs. You know, read things online and it says, be conscious about cropping mobiles because the images get so badly damaged, they say corrupted and so on, and they get stretched and pixelated and all these things. I crop my images like you wouldn't believe. I crop my images from my mobile just as much as I crop from a proper camera. So just to go back to Sue and others' comments on this one, in fact, I think it addresses one of your comments as well, Mick, is it really, really heavily cropped, straightened, some distortion fixed on it as well, chop off the bit on the left-hand side, focus on the person, and all of a sudden this picture tells a story. Now, the issue you have, because we're obviously, some of us are quite into club photography and entering competitions, is that when you crop to this extent, it can be tricky to print them to any sort of reasonable size. But that doesn't matter to me. What I got in minutes was an image that I was really, really proud of. And I realized that it didn't matter how long I spent on Photoshop, I was actually really quite pleased with that image I got on Snapseed. And this image, again, one of the very first ones I took, it gave me really early success after those periods of being quite unhappy with the images. Took me 5 minutes, 6 minutes to do, and there's no filter, there's nothing automated. It's just a series of really sort of quick and easy steps that I do to almost all of my images just to bring them to where I need to be. I can't think what I called this image. I think I might have called it Shame or some kind of rubbish ubiquitous title like that. But I wanted the mannequin to work with the person, got rid of everything else that wasn't important, kind of going on what a couple of people have said.
Mark, may I just ask a question?
Well, please do.
You actually preempted a part of what I was going to ask, but when you said about printing, have you printed any of these images? And to what size can you print them to get a good image?
A really good question, thanks. So basically, that camera at the time, I've got a newer mobile now, but the camera at the time had a 12 megapixel camera. This is probably cropped to around about a fifth of the original image size. So size-wise, I've probably gone up to A5, maybe not quite A4, but between A5 and A4. And that's when you start to sort of notice a little bit of pixel degradation at that point. However, this picture is just over 1 megapixel. So it works quite well on projectors and things like that. So a lot of my mobile phone photography on my older phone ended up either in small prints or on projected image. And it's just fascinating when judges give you opinions on things and you know this is taking you 4 minutes to produce and you're competing against people who've spent hours. Some of them are in this room, so I won't say any more.
Mark?
Yes, sure.
Can I just ask a question? Would you not send it to your email address, download it, and then put it into Photoshop and make a TIFF, and then work on it, and then crop it? And I'm not sure. What would you...
I suppose the answer is yes. Yes, you can. On this, and Crystal's just asked a really good question as well. So I'll try and pick up on both of those. So the question of emailing it, getting it from your phone to your computer. Some of the images I'm working with are sort of between 4 and 7 megabytes. They're quite easy. However, my new phone, as Crystal just mentioned, does actually shoot RAW. And when I take a RAW image, the image files are 85 megabytes each. So it's a really large image file, which can be tricky to just do a straight attach to email. I know there are lots of various transfer options, but actually, going back to mobile editing, most mobile editing software allows you to edit RAW files, and you pull out just as much detail, or very nearly as much detail as you would from Photoshop or Lightroom. So you can pull out shadow detail and highlight detail.
I need to update my phone.
Oh, this has caused me to spend money. I'm back in the gas, I'm back in the gear acquisition. Because it really, when I saw what was possible with quite a basic phone, I thought, whoa, I need to get all in on this. You know, I need to really get in further. But the reason, I suppose, Sheila, the reason I fundamentally don't move across or put it in Photoshop is I get what I want from all mobile editing, which is the immediacy of it, I suppose. So this is the other shot. So working on what Mick said and what somebody else said. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name as you were chatting. I straightened it up, removed the lower portion, removed the flag on the left-hand side. There's all sorts wrong with this picture. This is from a really old phone. All sorts wrong with it. It's as noisy as you can believe. There's some blown out lights on there. There's some absolutely blocked out shadows. But it works. There's something about it that just works. You know, you look at it and you think it's an interesting picture. It's not a competition winning picture, but it wasn't meant to be. It was just something I took on the way to the toilet. And it was just something I did to sort of prove whether I could do it or not. And it was actually these 3 pictures that really made me think about using a mobile day in, day out. And so sort of from that point, or from this point onwards, I've not gone to work, whether it's from here, from where I live in Faversham to the train station, or either way, I've not gone to work without taking at least 1 or 2 pictures. So mobile photography has become absolutely inculcated in my day-to-day life. And when you know you can take a picture of anything that interests you, you'll be amazed, or I was certainly amazed, at the kind of stuff that appeared out of nowhere. You know,
I think that those pictures are beautiful, and the picture of the students working in the library is absolutely gorgeous, and even the gaps or the joins between the glass walls, glass panels, they just be absolutely beautiful, crisp, lovely.
And this is the thing, and it's what Trevor was saying. Sorry, I know some people's names, and I don't know who it is, but it's what Trevor was saying about depth of field. I never worry about focusing. I was going to mention this later on, but let's talk about it now. I never worry about what setting the phone's on. I never even think about it. I hold it up. I expect the phone to do all the jiggery pokery for me. I expect it to do everything, and I just press fire and see what we get. And I get quite, sorry.
Can I ask one question? When I use Snapseed a lot, actually. I love it.
Yeah.
But when I save as a copy, I don't change the original photograph, but I save as a copy. But my copies are always tiny, tiny files.
That's interesting.
And we're talking in kilobytes rather than megabytes. I think you said yours was between 1 or 2.
Yeah, well, for the picture on the right-hand side, for example, was only 3 or 4 megabytes originally. As soon as I chopped it, cropped it, stripped it of color, it went down to sort of 1 megabyte, I think. So really, really small. But actually, it's still full size every time I save something. But I don't say, I export it rather than save it as, and I get full-size images from that.
Right.
Yeah, but no, it's worth investigating because I've not come across that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. Does that sound?
When you send the picture from your phone, sometimes your phone will ask you, look in your settings if it doesn't, it will ask you what size you want to send the picture.
Right.
And unless you send it at maximum volume or size, it will come out very small.
Right.
Yes, but with Snapseed, I export it and then it saves a copy of it. So I've still got the original untouched, if that makes sense.
Yes, so if you go back.
You're talking about a maximum of about 600 kilobytes, sometimes under 300.
I'll tell you what, when we're at playtime, I'll have a look and see whether I can see what.
Oh, thank you.
I would love to fix that problem. I'm not saying I can. I would love to fix that problem though.
Thank you.
But all of these pictures, I mean, Snapseed, we're going to talk about Snapseed more, but all these pictures were edited on my journey home. So I've got some pictures. I mean, one of them's really uncomfortable because it documents an event that was very, very sad. But I took the picture and I edit everything on the way home so that by the time I get home, I don't have to worry about it. And this has reignited my passion for photography because it means I can produce something that I think is reasonably good quality without having to sit up here in this room on my own, just using a computer, sort of in isolation. And I'd really miss chatting to my son. So there are I'm going to put a picture of a toilet on. I will just say now, I don't hang around in gents' toilets all the time, but there are going to be a couple of gents' toilets on tonight. I'm really, really sorry, but I'm going to use it just to illustrate a point. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is composition with a mobile phone. And I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. We all know that composition is really vital, absolutely sort of getting the image to where you need it to be and ensuring it's composed effectively to get all the elements that you'd like in. However, I found it significantly more important with mobile photography. So, for example, I had to compose my images and begin to preempt. The one on the left, the part on the left-hand side is the same staircase as the opening shot. I'll come back to that soon. But I had to sort of look at the image, look at what I wanted to take a photograph of, which, if you excuse me, I'm going to move a window I've got hanging over there. I was really interested in this man and his pushchair. So this is at the Tate Modern, if you haven't been. And I was pointing my phone through the viewing sort of gallery, the big glass windows, big areas of glass, 2 or 3 stories up. Now, I knew in my mind's eye what I wanted this image to be. Never going to be a stellar winning sort of competition salon entry image, but I knew in my mind's eye what I wanted it to be. But I knew before taking it, there is so much distortion on this image that whenever you take an image like this and put it into an editing app like Snapseed and you begin to level and straighten everything out, you actually lose really big chunks of the image. So when I straightened this up, the person actually appeared quite a lot further towards the top of the window. So one thing I learned at the top of the image rather, one thing I really learned quite early on is with your composition, ensure that you've got plenty of space all the way around so that when you do straighten up, move around, rotate or whatever you want to do, make sure that you've got room that you can lose things. And you may agree or you may disagree with this, but I very often, when I end up editing my pictures, I end up cutting out quite a lot of excess space all the way around. So they're very wide angle lenses, and you get all this exterior space. That's great. But when you when you change the perspective, you often lose it quite quickly. And also, as you may have experienced, phones, in comparison to cameras, have got really, really slow autofocus. Now, they might feel quick in good situations, but in comparison to a proper camera, as it were, they're really, really slow. So I had to preempt where my photograph was going to be. So on this one, in my mind, I had an image as to where I had a picture in my mind as to where I wanted the man in the pushchair to be. I had sort of an image as to what I wanted the rest of the picture to sort of look like. And before I took the picture, I tapped on the screen to pre-focus, to sort of tell it to focus where I thought the man was going to go, because I knew it was going to take a couple of seconds to focus. I pressed the shutter fractionally before the man walked into that exact point, because I knew the response times would be really, really quite slow. And at the beginning, I got hundreds and hundreds of blurry images that weren't quite right in some way, and it really drove me crazy. But then I began to understand the limitations of the phone, which are quite significant in comparison to your sort of proper cameras. Really interested to what you think about this picture on the top right. What would you keep and what would you lose? So, for example, the railing on the right-hand side, would you keep that or would you lose it? The railing on the left or the girders? If you were editing this picture, what would you keep and why?
I think you're going to edit it from, so you're going to keep part of that rail that comes down, and then just have the grey concrete as he's walking across.
Okay. Thank you. So keep it simple,
but straightened.
Okay. Any other ideas? What would you do with it? What are your thoughts? You might look at this and go, my God, Mark, this is the most boring picture ever. I get it's probably not the most exciting picture, but it's quite a technically sort of quite a challenging picture to go for. And one of the things that I enjoy about mobile photography is that I probably wouldn't have even bothered taking this with my camera. You know, if I had to put my camera up to the screen and photograph it. But mobile, I just take it as a sort of a throwaway shot. Any other ideas as to what you might do with it? Because there may be things that I've totally not thought of.
Can I make a comment?
Go for it, Chris, yeah.
I think what I would do is I would take everything out and just leave the person with the pushchair and the background, the area is walking, just to show desolation, isolation. So that's all it would be. It would be him or her, whatever it is, and the grey of the area where they're walking, and get rid of everything else.
So you go even more sparse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make it minimalist.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Now it's interesting. I wonder if the image sort of leads itself to that a little bit more. So this is where I went with it. Okay. Now there are again all kinds of things wrong with this image. It's starting to break. I mean, this is actually quite a big magnification on this image. It's starting to break down a little bit. The cropping's probably not quite right. The angle's probably not quite right. But ultimately, it works as an image, and I think you could probably move that crop along and have it in the middle of absolutely nothing. Rotate the crop around, have them walking at a different angle, and so on, and go for lots and lots of different sort of aspects on this. But the standout point to me was that I did this while my other half went to the toilet. So, sorry, no, that's probably not the standout point for me, but the main point was that I did this while my other half was at the loo. So I stood there waiting for, you know, my son and handbag, not my handbag, stood son and handbag, saw this, took it, switched my phone around, edited it instantly, and this picture was complete, finished within 2 minutes, okay? And that is actually a picture, although it looks slightly broken on this screen, that's a picture I could print off to a reasonable size, and I'd be quite confident about putting that into an exhibition. Now, talking about some limitations of cameras, my camera has got a zoom, okay? So this wasn't taken with the zoom, this was taken with a normal distance, but it does have a zoom. There's a real trade-off though, because when my camera is using the normal lens, it has stabilization. When it zooms, it doesn't have a stabilized lens. So it's a trade-off. It's also more megapixels when it's in its normal zoom as well, or normal state. So again, all about knowing the limitations. And the ergonomics of mobile phones are absolutely terrible. You've got a flat panel that you are using your finger to press to try and take a picture. And the moment you press it too hard, it moves. So you've got to really practice your art with this. And again, it's just something I've been working on for quite a long time. So again, just on the distortion, I'm not going to talk about men's toilets for too long, but I hope you understand why I took this picture. The idea of a wet floor in a men's toilet, I just loved it. You know, men have got really terrible aims. You probably wouldn't have this in a ladies' toilet, or I didn't necessarily think so. But the reason I showed you this one is because it's distorted, it's twisted. But I took the picture intentionally with enough space around it so that when I did press auto correct, because most of the stuff I do is on auto, when I did press auto correct, it just demonstrated what it would look like afterwards. And that's actually how much space it takes to straighten up this image. So it goes back to what a couple of people said right early on about changing your own perspective, about changing your own perspective. It's so important to get that perspective right, or to have enough space around so that you know when you move things, you've got some wriggle room and you've got some space to lose things. So on the right, the toilet was as shot, or the urinal was as shot, and on the left, that's just with a basic perspective correction, and it loses all of that space around it, all that excess space. So that's kind of my sort of #1 tip, I suppose, with mobile photography. So huge levels of distortion on mobile phones that we need to be aware of. We can use it to our advantage, as I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So the second element goes back to, I think it was Mick, what Mick was saying quite early on, which was, how do you kind of compose so you make the best of what you've got while still being aware of other stuff around you. So again, if I was to sort of go through what's wrong with this image, I often start with what's wrong with stuff and then fix it. So what's wrong with this image? Well, on the left-hand side, we've got a fifth or a sixth of the image, which is totally out of character with the rest of the image. And it's a really murky, horrible kind of picture. We've got, it's not straight, it's not, it's got a terrible perspective on it. We've got the people who are too dark, all kinds of various things that are wrong with that. But my son and wife were just in the next room over. And so I thought, here's a nice image. But what I've got used to doing, and I don't know when I started to do this, but I got used to not seeing the bits that I didn't want to be in the picture. And I suppose this is, I don't want this to be advice, but just sort of things to think about, is concentrate on what your immediate focus and your immediate subject point is. And to me, it was the display with the people in front of them, with the people in front of it. On the left-hand side, in my mind, I'd already switched that off because I knew it was going to go. And so again, a couple of really basic adjustments. Again, just 3 minutes. I think these people were still standing there by the time I'd finished doing this. And it's just the same kind of technique. Straighten it up, rotate it, and adjust the colors a little bit, crop out what you don't need. And it just transforms the image. But by the time I'd walked into the next room, it was done. I wouldn't have gone home and spent time doing this on Photoshop. And I suppose that's kind of what I'm trying to sort of get across. Now, the first time you take these pictures on a phone, it doesn't go very well because your phone tries to meter for all the different light sources in the room. So you've got a bright light on the left-hand side, you've got the light from the panel in front of the people. And so I did take 2 or 3 pictures before I got the lighting right. And if you've never done mobile phone photography, it's quite simple. You just tap on where you'd like to focus. So in this case, I just tapped on the small images, the small squares. And on my phone, you tap and press your finger on it, and it meters on there. So it actually makes sure that's exposed correctly. And then you can do the editing that you wish to the rest. And this was a raw file, so I was able to pull out the shadows on the people and turn that into something that I thought was quite reasonable for a 2-minute edit, and then move on. So this has never ever seen my computer, never seen sort of the light of day. But I'm really interested, what are your thoughts? I mean, is that something that you'd have even bothered taking, let alone spending time to edit? I'm interested in sort of yes or no. What are your thoughts? Because I did.
I think it's very well worth taking, Mark. It's a great picture. But I think I could have edited it, got the same result quicker in Photoshop.
You think?
Oh, yeah.
Ah, that's a challenge there, Trev. That does sound like a Zoom challenge we should have. Thank you. So there are things that I could have done better in Photoshop. I'm not a Photoshop expert, and I think that's why I enjoy mobile photography, because I'm a bit rubbish at Photoshop. This kind of helps me a little bit, but I'm sure I could have got rid of some noise, and I'm sure I could have brought out some more shadows on those people and sort of brought it to life a little bit more. But it kind of brings, you know, once you've got past perspective and past all that sort of extra space you need around, or extra stuff to get rid of, you kind of hit the big bugbear of what mobile phone photography is for me, and what people constantly said to me. You know, there are issues with mobile phone photography, and I suppose if I said to you, what's the number one thing that you think perhaps is a limitation to mobile phone photography, I'm not going to ask you, although you've been a really great audience, I'm not going to ask you, but I imagine it would probably be noise, that the images are very, very low resolution or very noisy in comparison to the counterparts from the camera. So my Fuji that I'm using here has got fantastic noise suppression or noise control, and I don't even have to worry about shooting at very, very high ISO, because I know that I'll have a salvageable image afterwards. But with mobiles, it seems that everybody's really, really concerned about the noise in images. So actually, there's a saying I'm going to share with you, and if you haven't seen, sorry, this is a bit of a plug, but I've managed to book Rick Salmon, who's a legend in my mind, to talk on the 24th of October. And what he says is, if a picture is so boring that you notice the noise, then it's a boring picture to start with. And it's a real sort of mantra for me. You know, if I put a picture on, the first thing I think is, God, that's really noisy, then the likelihood is it's a rubbish picture in the first place. So I'm going to put some pictures on that are unbelievably noisy pictures. Okay, so I've got three, but I'll put this one on first. So in case you can't recognize that shot in McDonald's, a little bit later in McDonald's, somebody sat on their own. It is a phenomenally noisy picture. That it's terrible grain absolutely everywhere. But I hope that the grain isn't your driving factor for looking at it. You know, it's edited in minutes. There's probably all kinds of things wrong with it technically. I'm not even going to go into it. But the grain shouldn't be the big issue. But it's one of the limitations, isn't it? You know, mobile phones have got terrible noise suppression, or terrible representation of noise. So grainy pictures, absolutely left, right, and center. Horrible, horrible grainy pictures. But for some reason, it doesn't matter, does it? Because when you look at them, there's something about the image that actually makes it worth all that noise, and you don't necessarily see the technical limitations of the phone. So both of these, in fact, all three, I'll just put the next one on. A rare color one for me, by the way. I don't do much color. But all three of these, apart from the one on the right, which was taken with a zoom, all three of these were just taken while I was just sat next to someone, or sat just a couple of meters away. Didn't even think to check any of the settings on the camera, just held it up, photographed it while I was still there, edited it really quickly and saved it. So all of these images, I mean, the one on the right hand side is actually taken in a petrol station in Faversham, and I'll edit that one for you after the break. But I actually edited that while I was waiting to get out of the petrol station. And it's just the immediacy that means that I can put that to bed. I've taken these three photographs. They've taken me 5 minutes to edit each. The middle one, I've entered into competitions at club level, and it did relatively well in different situations. Some judges didn't like it, others did. None of them commented on the noise. Nobody at all commented on any technical aspects. And neither should they. You know, if the picture's boring that you notice the noise, it's a boring picture. The one on the right is probably my most advanced edit on Snapseed, if I could ever have an advanced edit, because there was text on the side of the car, and I managed to, in Snapseed, with my finger on my mobile phone, managed to rub out the text on the side of the car as well. Did anybody get caught in that rain a couple of weeks ago, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, it was terrible.
Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely terrible, absolutely. But again, all of these have just been edited in the same way. They're all incredibly noisy, loads of technical problems with them, a bit wonky, some of them, but I just think it kind of works. But we know that with so many of these limitations, it's still really quite worth using them, because you hopefully get pictures that are kind of liberating. Now, every time I go out somewhere, it's the old adage, every time I go out somewhere, I carry my mobile phone. I don't carry my camera unless I'm going out to take pictures, but I always carry my mobile phone.
Just as a matter of fact, Mark,
yeah,
just a quick one.
Yeah.
That picture behind me of the two boats coming out of Dover, taken on an iPhone 8, absolutely riddled with noise. And what's the first thing you notice? The light on the funnel above my head.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I just think we've got to the point where we shouldn't say, oh, that's good for a phone. It's just a good picture or not, regardless of medium, And the things that really sort of jump out to me are that, a lot of my pictures are street photography pictures. I will sort of put my hands up and admit that. But phones are so ubiquitous. You can't walk down any high street and not see half the people glued to their phone in some way. That you holding a phone actually makes you more invisible than if you are just standing there without a phone, and certainly significantly less visible than if you're holding a camera. Everybody expects to be holding a phone. I've never ever been challenged for any photographs I've done. I go to Canary Wharf and things. I've never been challenged by any security guards when using my mobile phone at all. And I've been challenged a couple of times with proper cameras, but not with mobile phones. And I just find it incredibly liberating. So intimate pictures of people. I do show people my images, by the way. So when I take people's pictures, I go and show them, because I don't think it's fair otherwise. So I was sat on the next table over, snapped this, and it looks really lovely and intimate and all this other kind of rubbish that you can make out from this picture. But he was actually giving her his phone to check a link. So there's nothing romantic about it in any way.
Wow.
But it's just interesting that you could snap that image just while my phone was being pulled out of my pocket, because I saw it instantly. Didn't even take my proper camera out that day. Just something I thought. So it's liberating. Yes, absolutely.
What would you do about the halos around the dark bits?
Well, that's actually my fault. Thanks for mentioning that, because I was going to mention it in a later picture, but thank you. The reason is that that's the case is because I've over sharpened it. So what's happened here is that when I usually add more clarity or more sharpness. And what I did here was I used both. And so I used the clarity to give it some punch, and then I sharpened it too much. So this has got it's way too sharp, really. But one of the downsides of Snapseed, I suppose, is that unless you go and do what Sue says, which is save it so you can go back and edit it, you could spend an hour editing something. Well, you don't spend 10 minutes. You could spend 10 minutes editing something, save it, and then think, oh no, I want to change just one aspect of that. But you've got to go back through the entire process again. So with this, I would have to go back to that original file and redo it. It wouldn't take me long, and I think it's probably worth doing, actually. I think that halo does need to go. Thank you. But I've used it countless times on public transport, countless times. Honestly, I don't hang around toilets, please. I don't hang around toilets all the time. But I wouldn't, I just went in for a Jimmy Riddle, as we said up north, and I saw this, and I thought, some of my friends know that I've been documenting lockdown using my mobile phone. I will only show you a couple of these at the end, but I would never have gone into a toilet with my camera, set it up and taken that photograph with my phone, snap it immediately, edit it, put it onto social media, put it wherever you want, and it's gone and done, and it tells a little story. So I think it's kind of less weird carrying a mobile phone than it is carrying a proper camera. I work in education. I work an awful lot with children, and the sort of image that any man has walking around with a camera anywhere near any groups of people, particularly children, is actually vilifying. It's terrifying. But nobody's concerned with people walking around with mobile phones next to children. So I find it you're kind of less obvious, less weird. And again, it's just the instant editing. So looking for I was really interested in this one because of the shapes and because of how she interacted with the shapes. She was on a mobile phone. She didn't give two hoots. This was in the middle of Tottenham High Street, so there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people passing. And I just sat in front of her, waited until there was a slight gap, took the picture, waited, didn't like it, took it again, edited it there and then, and went and showed her and sort of said, you know, here's the picture I've just taken, what do you think? And that immediacy is what really appeals to me. And maybe I've got a shortened attention span, I don't know. But the ability to just do it, fix it, finish it in minutes really, really appeals to me. But I didn't think you would be able to take street photographs with a mobile phone, actually. I've always used a big setup for street photographs. And then I realized as soon as I worked within the limitations of the camera, i.e. clicking on the camera where you think someone's going to walk, maybe using the pro mode and changing the shutter speed a little bit so you made sure you capture them, I all of a sudden stopped using my proper camera for street photography on a day-to-day basis. So it's just that working within the limitations. I kind of don't agree with the best camera you have is the one that's on you. Sorry, is the best camera you have is sort of what's on you at the time, because if I wanted my best camera all the time, I'd carry my big camera from home. I suppose I'm perfectly happy with using my phone camera all the time, and I accept the limitations. And now I've come to terms with the limitations, I think I get sort of significantly better images from it. Any questions on these, by the way? Sorry, I realise I've rattled on a bit there. Any questions on these, just out of interest?
What's a halo? Is it a shadow? Or?
Yeah, well, it's the opposite to a shadow. So a halo, there's going to be far more qualified people in here to talk about this than I am. But a halo is where, if you look on the, I don't know why I'm pointing at this. Hang on, let me see if I can get a pointer. I'm a teacher, I should know about these things. Wait there. There we go, look at that, oh, magic. So on the right-hand side of her back, and actually on the chair, there's a slight gap between the edge of the chair and the actual shadow it casts. And that's because the software has looked for an edge that it can sharpen, and it can find the edge of that chair very easily, and it can find her back very easily. And when it sharpened it to the point where it's actually separated it from the shadow. And that's what a halo is. So it looks like there's a white ghost around the images, yeah. And it is a sign of something that's been, if you like, worked a little bit too much. So this is an image that's been edited sort of too much. But because you've noticed it, I would probably not use that image again, because and that's not in a negative way, but the other images caught your attention and you didn't necessarily see the limitations of them. But because you've seen the limitation of that one, I'd probably get rid of it, because it's kind of not grabbed you enough that you haven't seen that, if that makes sense.
But it's a nice image, Mark. So the halo can actually be removed separately.
In
it
Photoshop.
And it wouldn't take that long to actually remove it, because it's a really interesting image.
Yes, it's a good image. You're wrong to say to lose it. Unfortunately, it requires a bit more of a sophisticated edit, and that's Photoshop. I
agree, Simon. I agree. However, you're right, and it's kind of that. Sorry, I hope that didn't come across as defensive. I'm not being defensive at all. I just think when I start to look for what's wrong, I kind of think, get rid of it. I'm really harsh. My images I get rid of sometimes just because they're even slightly blurred, or they're not quite where I'd want them to be, and I'm really sort of quite vicious with that.
Mark,
so, yes.
Mark, could I ask, can you go back to the previous slide?
No, is that Pat?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry Pat, yeah.
You said you took a picture of that girl in a gym kit and processed it and then showed her.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Usually people say thanks very much, and oh, that's interesting, and don't care. She wasn't, because I always say to people, listen, I'm here, I used to say I'm a school teacher, it's okay, because that just made them feel safe. But I don't anymore. I say, listen, I'm just here with my son. I thought you looked really interesting in that background. I'm a little bit into photography, so I'm just taking this photograph. If you do, you mind? I always ask if people mind first, and usually they say yes. Sorry, no. I've only had one person who said that they didn't want their photograph taken, but she was really quite flattered. She thought it looked quite nice, and I said, would you like me to send it to you? And she said, no, that's fine. And that was the end of our relationship. And I've often found I've only actually sent images to 3 or 4 people. So there's a couple of girls in Canterbury. I'm not sure if they're students and perhaps they recognise me, but I photographed them in various sort of gothic gear. And every time I've said, you look great, can I take your photograph? Yes. Do you want the pictures? No. So, but I've tended not to have a problem because I'm kind of quite honest with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Some people, no, some people do find it flattering. I think I'd probably feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's why I ask, to be honest. So going back to this route then, so I realise it's got to be time for playtime soon. I'm sorry, I'm overrunning. I do get a bit chatty. What I've done is I've put the kind of befores and after. So we're going to do some editing in the second part, which is probably not going to be quite as long. But I'm going to do a little bit of editing in the second part, but I've done some befores and afters. And you might totally agree, totally disagree with what I've done to these images. But I'm hoping you can kind of see where I've come from. So this image, most of the street photography I do isn't street portraiture. It's something that I cheesily say geometric street, because I tend to go for images that have a great deal of geometry in them, because I find geometry really, really fascinating. And when I find someone doing something in that kind of upsets it in some way, I just absolutely find it fascinating. So on this one then, the actual image that's next is slightly different because he has got a cigarette in his mouth. I couldn't find this, the original image. I'd obviously deleted it. But could you just tell me what you would get rid of? What would you keep? What would you get rid of, and why? What are your thoughts?
Oh, because the two signs have been cut off on their corners, I'd lose them completely.
Okay. So the perspective of the extra space that you've got from the sensors and the lens is fine at that point because you're going to narrow that in. Okay. Anything else you might change?
I like the sign on the left. I would keep the sign on the left, and I would get rid of the sign on the right. I think it's simple. The way it's pointing in the same direction, I think adds to the overall composition. I like that arrow pointing up.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish I'd spoken to you before I edited it. I didn't think about that.
I like the two figures as well, the real person and the person on the graphic person.
God, why weren't you here a month ago? Sorry, no, go on. Sorry, no, go for it. What else? What are your thoughts? Because I actually did the edit that I'm going to show you. Took me, I don't know. I think I got it down to about 30 seconds, and I showed the guy afterwards. So I will apologise. It is in black and white.
Mark, if you had waited a little bit longer, you might have got him actually eating one of the hamburgers.
I am dedicated, but I'm not sure I would have waited for that long ago. That's a really good point, though. And so I did what I considered to be a really short, sharp, horrible crop on it.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, but there's loads of stuff wrong with it. Loads and loads of stuff wrong with it. I mean, he is noisy. The picture, everything's noisy. It's not quite straight. There's all kinds of stuff wrong with it. But actually, the initial impact for me was this works. I'm quite happy with this, and more importantly, I'm happy with it from a sort of a 3-minute edit.
It works nicely. It's a totally different picture, and the Greek key design on the steps you brought out wonderfully. I didn't get that design on the steps at all with the first shot.
But isn't it interesting how we all look, because that's all I saw. Isn't that fascinating? So when I looked at that, all I saw was those steps, and all I wanted to get. Yes, Trev.
That crop you did was great. I would have cropped it just like that, but I would have left the top of the stairs in.
Yeah.
And a bit beyond it to give the picture more depth.
Absolutely.
And this figure would have been small. You contrast the size of the figure with the size of the steps.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a little bit more perspective in there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is why I really like mobile photography, because I'll be honest, if I'd spent 6 hours editing this, and then 3 of you said, oh, actually, I'd have done this, I'd have probably been sat there, probably less receptive to ideas. But I know this has taken me a minute, and it will take me a minute to enact that. In fact, during the playtime, I may try and get this image up and edit that really, really quickly to do what you people have said, because I find that really interesting. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you. So I have to move quite quickly. I'm really sorry. Windows are your friend. Loads of stuff happening. In fact, I think this is just around, just a little bit further up from the very first image I showed, or one of the very first images. I hang around Windows. Sorry, I do hang around Windows because people do interesting things outside of Windows. Have you noticed this? They look down, they check their phones because they're doing price comparisons and do all kinds of stuff. And this person came up and I thought, wow, look at her dress. That's really interesting. But more importantly, she's bowing to these other people who are there. So loads of stuff going on all the way around it. 30-second edit again. Would I do it differently? Yes, I would. I would probably get rid of the click and collect in the bottom left, maybe get rid of H&M in the bottom right. And I would use Snapseed to bring out a little bit, to minimize that further. But I got an image I was happy with. I might do something to that left-hand side as well. But I became much happier with the images I was taking, and I got closure. So that image is finished. Move on, you know. I've not used that in club competition, but that's, I would expect that to do, you know, do reasonably kind of well just because of the image, just because of the sort of style. And with mobiles, you are kind of, sorry, I'm not going to mention the noise on this one. Don't hate me for the noise, but this is a library in Canterbury. And if you ever get a chance to go to libraries and actually look at some of the architecture and look at some of the symmetry in libraries, it's quite phenomenal. And obviously you're not allowed to use cameras in these kinds of specific places. People get a little bit shirty about it. So I just stood at the top of the stairs with a mobile phone for about 25 minutes and nobody said anything to me, and waited until the right person walked in the scene. And it was when I got to this point that I realized I still had to put the same level of effort into my photography with a phone that I did with my camera. I just had to work it a slightly different way, but I still had to plan and I still had to think about things as well. So again, photographed, edited, shared with the person. He didn't like it. What does he know? But yes.
I think your eye goes straight down the steps and directly to him. I think it's very successful.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. What about the noise? Too much noise? No,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I've seen him.
Yeah.
And down the stairs and the symmetry.
So since I took this picture, my camera on my new phone is significantly more advanced, and so I'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. So one of my later pictures, then I took my camera club because I spoke to the security guards and they let us in. I took my camera club up to our library at university and stood there, and I tried to convince everybody. There were about 6 of us there. I tried to convince everybody a shot would appear if they waited, and as usual, people didn't wait. They went elsewhere. And I waited about 20 minutes for this person to walk into my shot. And that's the kind of skill I picked up when I was using or learned photography with my proper camera and just applied it to my mobile. It's the same skill. I knew where she was going to be walking. She walked past me. So I clicked on the bottom of the stairs. So I would be focused on that point when she walked through it. And this was just a single shot. Not going to even talk about what you'd edit, because you'd edit all the lines. You do sort of all kinds of jiggery pokery all over the place to bring out that detail. So just really quickly, I made sure the highlights weren't blown out so that when you look forward, it wasn't detracting your eye. Straightened everything up, cropped it, got rid of bits and bobs I didn't need. It's just the same skill you use on a normal camera, but you do it instantly and get the outcome instantly. And the university are using this as some of their marketing literature. They never asked me what camera I took it on. They weren't interested. They were just really pleased with the outcome. Didn't pay me anymore though. So any of you work in higher education, you'll find that they do a lot of backslapping, but not a lot of wallet fixing. It's quite a lot of that going on. I am aware, by the way, that we're going to get to at half time here. So just outside the university, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, getting rid of all the outside stuff, cropping and so on. So this is my walk to the train station. You know, so all these pictures are basically from a really narrow route, just using my phone. I've never seen anybody outside of a custody office before. And I thought, he's probably not going to hit me because he's outside of a custody office, and things would go really badly wrong for him if he attacked someone outside a police station, you know. So I thought that would be fine. And I didn't have my proper camera on me, And I took my phone, so I took a picture with my phone. I think he saw me. Obviously, he's looking straight at me, so I obviously wasn't that discreet. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody was saying something. There are loads and loads of things wrong with this picture. It's bent all over the place. I mean, there's so much wrong with it. I almost deleted it before I got to the train, but I thought, no, I'm sure there's a picture in there somewhere. And so on the train, it's still really harshly edited, very noisy. I'm sure I could do better if I went back, but I didn't want to go back. I've never revisited this picture. I think Trev will back me up on this one. I think I might have won a competition with this one, Trev, or got an 18 or 19 out of 20 with this one. Just because it's such an interesting picture. And that's something else I learned using my phone, is that if it's an interesting picture, if the content's interesting, it doesn't matter what you're taking it with. It's kind of still an interesting picture.
Is
really,
Mark?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Mark, because he's also just dumped his cup there. It's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah. Or you think that story, don't you? So you kind of put together. No, it's true. You make your own stories up from these things, and I think that's what's really fascinating. And the fact that you're interested in sort of talking about it. Now, I did do some edits to this. I think I did some spot edits and removed some of the grime off the door and things like that. But fundamentally, I left it as is. Sorry, I'm really running out of time. I don't want to keep you here all night. I went out for a night with my friends, for a drink with my friends. No one is safe. This poor guy sat waiting for his friends outside the pub. I'm sorry, if you are going to stand next to a window, some northerner's going to take a photograph of you. Do apologise. So just saw the natural framing for the window itself, and showed my friends how easy this was. This was a little bit, well, I say harder, slightly harder, because he's got some lighter areas around his eyes here and around his mouth, and he's sort of got some areas around here. So I just had to do a little bit more editing on that one, but again, just minutes, and it's an image that I've kept, and I was sort of really quite pleased with. Won't be the right thing for everybody, but it sort of works for me. Right, last ones, I promise. I'm getting there. Bent, twisted, faded, noisy. You know, what else is going to go wrong with this picture? I took this, I knew he was looking straight at me, but I thought, you know, I'll go for it, I'll take it anyway. And just a couple of edits, I could probably improve the noise a little bit more on that one. But a couple of edits, and it turned it into a picture actually I was really quite pleased with. You know, there's something about this dynamic that works sort of quite well. And all the time, I'm not leaving Snapseed. You know, I don't even use Lightroom Mobile. It's just a, you know, if it works, and I think there's something there, give yourself plenty of space around the outside, because you can see there's quite a lot of distortion and quite a lot of rotation going on there between those two. Quite a lot of heavy cropping as well. So give yourself the space around the outside edge to do that and to have that sort of freedom. And I think mobile photography is absolutely wonderful. And this was something that I thought that I actually won. I think I won something at the Kent competition with this one, and I called it "What's So Funny." Just turned up there at the right place at the right time. I've had to do nothing to this picture. This is one of the few pictures that I just snapped and entered and sort of done really well with. And it was that immediacy again. I was just holding, I think I was holding my son in my arm. By the way, if you ever do want to do street photography, holding a toddler is a great idea, because nobody cares. But I think I was holding my son in my arm, and I just used my phone one-handed to take the picture. This picture would not be there if I hadn't used my mobile phone. I suppose that's kind of my takeaway, is make sure you take pictures, make sure you get out there and use this device that I know most of you have. I haven't fixed everything on this one because I didn't think it needed it. I mean, the Ernest Jones is really wonky, but this is an example of what I think Sue, perhaps Sheila, was saying really early on about getting closer. So I was actually much closer to this person, and you can see his feet and his legs are just really stretched, but he looks like he's kind of cheering, and that's why I quite like it. And I've captured it because these guys behind him are cheering. I've walked past these adverts for ages thinking, you know, with my mobile phone, I've taken pictures thinking it's got to be the right person. And all this person had, he just had cramp in his arm. That's all he was doing, just had cramp, stretching his arm. And I took it, and it looks like, you know, like he's cheering. Wouldn't have happened. It's not the best picture in the world. I wouldn't have had it had I not had my mobile with me. And it kind of got me onto sort of documenting a little bit more. And this is one of my train rides to work, and I'll show you the original for this after half time. It's a really hard-hitting picture, actually. This is just after the Manchester bombings, the day after the Manchester bombings, and I would never normally take pictures like this. It wouldn't be something that would really appeal to me because it actually upsets me quite a lot, but I felt I had to take it. And due to the discreet nature of just holding your phone like that and snapping it and turning it around and capturing that, it meant I had something to record that event. And that's sort of really sort of quite valuable and quite personal to me. I was going to talk about lockdown, but I'm not going to. I'm going to skip past them, and I may come back to them a little bit later, but I will come back to these. Okay. Oh my goodness, have I broken it? There we go. So it is playtime. It is time just to have sort of 10 or 15 minutes for a cup of tea, if that's all right. And then afterwards, I'm going to pick maybe 4, 5, 6 pictures. I won't keep you here all night. 4, 5, 6 pictures and do some live edits. I'm going to do what I would do, but I really want you to tell me what you would like to do. So with the picture with the on the stairs, I'd really love to edit that and see that sort of arrow on the left hand side to see what that looks like. And that's why I love this kind of imaging, because it's so easy and so fulfilling, sort of quickly fulfilling. And the sort of 3 things I wanted to take away from the first half were just work within the limitations of the device. And I think mobile photography should be part of your daily life. If you've got a mobile, you know, use it. You know, you catalog those events that you wouldn't ordinarily. When it was lockdown, I went out every day with my son to play and took photographs every day of just normal day-to-day stuff. And none of them were interesting at the time. But looking back at them, I've got 65 really interesting pictures now of a time that will hopefully never be repeated again. Mm. So I'm going to just hold it there. I'm not sure what time is it. What time are we on? Oh gosh, that is late. That is late. Can we have 15 minutes? Is that okay? Can we come back about 25 to 9? Is that okay, guys?
Okay.
Yeah.
And please feel free just to sort of chat away. I know there's people sort of chatting in the typing in the chat as well. Thank you very much. And also thanks so much for listening to me. I don't think I've spoken for an hour and 20 minutes for about 7 months. So well done, everybody. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing that. We should hopefully be able to see each other now. We've got a really nice mix of people, by the way. Okay. And I shall just put my little slideshow up with what's coming up. Thank you hugely. I know I sent you an email about Elke Vogelsang, the dog photographer. We've had 50 tickets sold for Elke Vogelsang. She's extraordinarily expensive. I will just say that, which reflects the sort of price. But really worth going to see. If you've not looked at any of her work before, have a look at Elke Vogelsang. She's absolutely phenomenal. And I've got Lisa in the bottom right hand corner. Hi Lisa, I taught her son. Hi Lisa. You can tell these people that I am a real teacher, Lisa. Look at that. Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, I'm real, I'm not just messing around. Thank you. And I'll be back in about 10 minutes, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
do that. Competitions. So I spend 125th of a second. I spend 125th of a second. I spend 125th of a second.
see if I can get my camera back on, although I'm not going to use it for very long. So I know we're early, so don't worry about it if you're still getting your cup of tea and so on. Okay, I haven't really said hello to everybody. I should say hello to Liz as well. Liz has just appeared in my sort of right-hand side. Hello, Liz. Oh, microphone's off, but you can give me a wave if you like. Oh, there we go. There we go. It's interesting how it decides who's going to be viewed. I'm not sure what you can see, but I think it depends upon sort of when people join and so on. So let's have a look. I'm going to start the recording again in a second, but a little bit early. Just drop that back there. So yeah, just again, thanks very much for coming and sort of taking part. It's a really, really nice community of people. And I can tell from all your lovely emails telling me that I've made mistakes, that you're a lovely community of people. What I would like to do, if you're interested, please say no, or I mean, just sort of let me know in some way. But I'm really interested in sort of sharing the photographs that we might take. So I was going to share with you some images that I've taken in the last couple of days on my mobile. And is that something you might be interested in if we did it through Facebook or something like that? Could you give me sort of a thumbs up if you'd be interested in sharing something, even just sort of one or two things? Yeah, okay. So maybe sort of half a dozen or so. Cool, thank you. What I might do then is thank you as well, Crystal, is just sort of create a group that we can just bung pictures on just to show what we're doing, because I think it's a really lovely way of sharing that, and it will be non-judgmental. So we won't be saying, oh, this is great, that could do with some extra work. It's just sort of share with us what your pictures look like afterwards. Okay, it is around 8:30. We've still got 41 people, 100%. That's great. Now, what could go wrong? Okay, I'm ready. Fingers crossed for me, everybody. Just before I share this, I'll say that this is a combination of pictures from my older camera. So that was kind of 5-6 years ago now. Actually, the camera that I had when I taught your son, Lisa. There you go. So it's that old. It's a really old camera now, or it was a really old phone. So I've still got that one, and I'm using that in combination with some of my pictures from my new camera, my new phone. And just to sort of answer, we're sort of asking in private messages and things, is that I use a Huawei. I think it's Huawei phone, and it's a P20 Pro. So it's not a current sort of super expensive flagship phone. It's about 2 or 3 generations old now, and I bought it at the time because I read on DxOMark. I'm not sure if you're familiar with DxOMark or not. I'll put the link on. In fact, if somebody could put the link on the chat, that would be great. But DxOMark rank camera sensor quality and picture and video quality across a range of settings and across a range of subjects. And you might agree or disagree with their findings. You might kind of think, one phone can't be that much better than another. But at the time, it was the highest on the chart, because I knew that I was doing so much photography with my other phone that I wanted to make sure that I got something that was going to be really good quality. And it's also got a zoom, like I say. So what I'll do is I'll just do a quick screen share, or try to do a screen share. That's how we go. And I'm doing iPad via cable. Can we just have a quick group fingers crossed? Let's see if this works. Oh, trust. There we go. Now. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Thank you, whoever that was.
We can.
Whoever that was. You're wonderful. Okay, so all I've done here, I'm going to be looking down a lot. So what I apologize for not looking at the phone very much. So sorry, at the phone. I've got phones on my mind. At the camera very much. So all I've got here is, in fact, if I just press open and look at my sort of recent pictures, I just get rid of my wedding photographs. I was married quite recently, by the way, and I won't ask you for any gifts or anything like that, but I got married quite recently. But just remember that.
You've had an eventful year then.
For this time next year. I have had an eventful year. Thank you. What I've got here are just, I just picked a random, we're not going to go through all these, just picked a spurious range of images, all directly from my mobile phone of different ages. So we've got in the middle, the middle of the 3, on the left, you've got the picture of the people, of the girl, of the lady with the newspaper. On the right hand side, if you're familiar with that, we've got Hastings Pier. Beneath there, we've got various sort of streety shots. And as I say, although quite a few of these are streety shots, it's kind of, I think you can apply this kind of editing anywhere. It doesn't have to be this. It just happens to be that this is my passion. So the one that really jumps out at me, and it really, really jumped out at me at the time, was this one. So I walked through Faversham High Street and Court Street, or whatever the street is, and you can see why, you can see what I'm going to say here. This guy in the middle just absolutely jumped out at me like you would not believe. I thought, I've got to get him in some way, because there's a real image there. Now, if I'd have had my my big, well, first of all, I was collecting, I think I was collecting my son from the childminder, so there was no way I would have had my camera, and I couldn't get too much closer to him because it would have been really, really obvious. So I did that kind of dreadful thing of, I'm going to shoot it. It's as wonky as heck, but it doesn't matter. I'll fix it in post-production, and that's the mantra to everything, isn't it? So with back to Snapseed, really quite simple. So on Snapseed, when you load something up, on the right hand side you have a series of filters and things you can add, and I don't use any of those filters. I kind of stick to a really, really simple palette of options that kind of get me the image that I want. So I'm just going to tap on the pencil button, on the edit button first of all, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong way of editing these, sort of whether you have to do things in a certain order. What I try to do is get my straightening and my cropping done first, get the image kind of looking something like I kind of wanted it to originally, and then do some heavier duty editing on it. So can I just ask for a second before we start, what are your thoughts, black and white or colour, before we go any further? What are your thoughts? Yes, from Pat. Thanks, Pat. That's a great answer. Black and white or colour, Pat?
Colour at the moment.
Colour at the moment. Okay.
You just show us black and white again.
Sorry?
That was the answer to, is it Snapseed?
All right. I'm sorry, Pat. It's me being cheeky, isn't it? I'm sorry. I'll get slapped for that. I didn't realise you were helping and assisting. I do apologise. I'm sorry. Another ticket on the way. So we'll stick with it in colour to start with, but we may want to change that. So really simple. Onto rotate. As soon as you go on to rotate, it automatically straightens it for you. So it tries to find something that's relatively straight. Now, as you can see, what it's looked for is the far left-hand side, and it's looked for those buildings, and it said, well, that's straight. So I'm going to work on there. So what I'm going to do is just put my finger on the screen, drag it around a little bit. And what I'm actually going to do is look for the truck to be straight. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there we go, kind of round about there. So I'm not really worried about the wonkiness of everything else, just really interested in that truck or in that van itself. Now I may look at flipping it a little bit later because there's something quite nice about left to right, but I think I'll keep it in this orientation for the time being. So just yes on that one. Really basic first edit. So it kind of still looks a bit wonky because everything else around it looks wonky. So back onto the pencil. Now I might look at the perspective, and I'll just sort of demonstrate this really quickly. So onto the perspective option, you've got the option of dragging around edges and things like that. So if I click on free, you've got the option of sort of moving elements around really quickly to straighten them up and so on. And when you try and straighten something up, it automatically fills or tries to fill whatever areas it's created. I'm just going to press X on that one and just try and do an auto perspective instead. It may not need much perspective work, and it may not actually look good when it's finished, but I'll do an auto perspective just to see what that looks like. Okay, so it's just slightly tilted it and reorientated it a little bit. So we'll see if that works. So after that, I'm going to get into my sort of heavier duty stuff. So let's look at cropping. Now, the beauty of digital images is, we don't really have to be constricted to a specific ratio. So I'm going to go for a free crop rather than using a specific size. And I'll just drag it down to where I think the interest is in the image. It's not going to let me do it, is it? Okay. Oh, come on. Just talk amongst yourselves, everyone. There we go. So, matter of interest, do you think this is too tight? What are your thoughts? Do you think you would go a little bit wider? And I can change it quite easily, but what are your thoughts on this one?
I'd have the wheels and the side.
Wheels, yeah.
The wheels as well. Okay. Yeah. Let's go for the wheels as well. I hadn't thought about that.
I think he needs to look as if he's in the van rather than a box.
Okay, good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So when I originally edited this so he was in a box. I didn't want him to be in a box, but yeah, okay. So I was also concerned at this point about being sort of that light area on the top left-hand side. But let's go with some wheels in there as well. May have to rotate this again because that movement.
I like it without wheels.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me that now.
Because I think the light's a bit undefined, and also it's a bit of mystery. Like, where is he?
Okay. So we've got a mysterious man sitting in a box. That's the look we're going for. Okay,
Yeah.
I like it.
Anyway.
So again, once I've done some really basic cropping, actually a lot of what I do to my images is really, really basic. So a bit of basic cropping and look at tune image. So tune image allows you to adjust what you would normally find on Lightroom and Photoshop. So once you go into tune image, you just, I'm sorry if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, you move your fingers up and down the picture, and you can adjust the contrast and saturation and so on. So usually with any kind of street image, I go for usually quite a high sort of contrast. And you may think this is too much, this may hurt your eyes, I'm sorry, I do appreciate that. But I usually go for quite a sort of a high contrast like this, because I want him to be really separated from the background as well.
Can I ask you a question too? I don't know anything about iPhones and so on, but once you've cropped, can you go back to it? What if you've changed your mind and decided, well, I've done this bit of editing, etc., but now I want to go back, and you've already edited part of it, but the other bit isn't edited, and you might want to change your mind.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure who said that, but thank you very much, because once you, I'll finish doing the edits to this, and then I'll show you that you can go back to a certain extent. Okay. Because there is an option to go back and backtrack through the history on an Android. I'm sure it's the same on an iOS as well. So I'll come back to that one if that's okay. So on top of that, there's a really bright bar at the bottom there where he's sat. So I'll go into my highlights, drop the highlights right down. It won't get rid of the bar entirely, but I can fix that in a second or two. Okay, what else do I like? Well, I quite like the shadows, and I quite like the shapes that's behind him. So I've just gone into the shadows, just sort of bring those shadows out a little bit more, just to brighten them up, so it doesn't really affect anything else. But I'm not sold on the wheels, I will say. I've got the wheels in there, but I'm not sold on them. We may end up accidentally deleting those wheels. And then
you need the wheels as well as the doors.
Oh, and now we can. Okay, that's why you want to go back and re-edit. Okay, I get that. So we have to go back at a different point. So just enact that editing really quickly. And with Snapseed, what you can do is you can just hold your finger on the picture, and it shows you before and after. So if I just put my finger on it, it shows you what it was like before. And then when I release, it shows you what it's like after. Now, at the moment, that's not a kind of huge kind of difference. I get that. That's quite simple, quite easy. So now after this, I'd go into a little bit more detail. So back onto the pencil again. My favorite slide, which is the detail slide, and I am really, really brutal with this. So I go right on structure, usually push structure probably a little bit too high in certain circumstances. Push the structure quite high. Maybe scroll up and look at sharpening as well. Tend not to sharpen JPEGs. I do sharpen raw images, but I tend not to sharpen JPEGs too much. RAWs definitely need it. Not so much on JPEGs. Exit out of that. And then on this one, I will probably either look at adding a vignette on the bottom left-hand side, or looking at some of the drama or tonal contrast options, which are a bit gimmicky sometimes, a bit filtery. But I'll look for a vignette here. And because this is all touch and drag, the vignette at the moment is going to have a bright spot in the middle of this image, or in the middle of this dot. So if I position that on him, drag the vignette down a little bit, and then slide my finger to the left to darken it down. Oops, to darken it down further. Oop, not that far. Darken it down there. That's kind of what I would probably be going for in one of my quick street shots. The back top of that band is a little bit too dark, I'll be honest. Let me go back to the crop. Those wheels are really bugging me, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, it's not going to let me get rid of them now, is it? You might have to have them in because I can't blooming well click it and shrink it. There we go. I'm going to be really sharp with that and go right down there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at that point, I may, well, in fact, in that point, I go back onto some sort of more specific edits now. This is a real quick whiz through. And bear in mind, I'm doing this on my phone, just with my sort of finger in daylight. So I've not got a nice desk that I'm using this now. And I'm not an expert on this by any means. But all I would do to this one then is just look at the brush tool, and I would look at burning some of that light, so some of that sort of bright area down a little bit. So I would just look at the exposure, drop the exposure a little bit. And when you're working on Snapseed, as soon as you start to touch it, it starts to edit it. So if you pinch in, sort of do an inverse pinch and open it up, you can sort of see in much more detail what you're going to edit. And then I would just kind of, oh, that looks a bit harsh. But I would just kind of brush on there. Sorry, that's a little bit too dark, I think. But that's the kind of thing I would do, and I would sort of continue around a little bit more with that. And then befores and afters, again, it's just finger press as you had before, and release for and after. And I can't remember, I did put this into a competition, and again, I was quite lucky with this one. I did sort of quite well with it. The judge never mentioned the fact that it's noisy. He's quite pixelated. There's a little bit of a sort of a halo going around, because it's actually just quite an interesting little picture. And I wouldn't have taken that shot, just an example, I wouldn't have taken that shot if I'd been carrying my normal camera. It almost isn't worth getting the camera out to take that shot, but just a couple of minutes later, I've got a reasonably decent shot out of it. And whoever asked the question about editing and going back to edit, so there are some sort of rudimentary options to go back through that point. And at the top right-hand side, difficult to show you, top right-hand side, there's a little reverse arrow, and you've got undo, which obviously takes back one step, revert takes it back to the original point. But if you look at view edits, then it lists everything that you've done during that point, and you can actually go back to them and edit them individually. So if I wanted to, I could click on the details one and actually go back to the point that I did those details, and I can, so did that detail edit, I can remove that edit, or I can you know, manipulate it in some way. Equally with the rotate, so if the rotate wasn't quite good enough, I can go back and change that. Same with the perspective and so on. It actually takes you back through the track. But yeah, I was quite happy with sort of that edit, and that's kind of how I would keep it. Really interested in your thoughts. I mean, I know we haven't got time to go through everybody, but what would you do differently? How would you approach that? You know, bearing in mind, I spent 4 minutes editing that, and I got a competition entry out of that. I did enter that into a competition, and it did relatively well. What would you do differently, apart from the wheels? What would you do differently?
I'd take out the top left slice of arc there.
Yeah,
and on the right.
Yeah, and actually, I suppose
I'd black those out.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be tricky to get rid of them, but actually, yeah, to darken them down using that brush might be. Yeah, thank you.
You can do the clone in Snapseed, can't you?
Yeah, let's try that.
And
yeah, let's try it.
Spot healing as well.
Yeah, let's go for the healing, because I actually find the healing works really well. Yeah, it is.
I found the healing really hard. It sort of nips bits of the picture, and maybe it's using a fat finger or something. I don't know.
Well, I won't comment on the size of anyone's finger, but yeah, okay, I'll go for the healing. So
yeah,
just zoom in again, and let's see if that works. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Look, is that Pat? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Pat. I'm sure I booked you for a reason last year. Oh, it's not quite worked on that one. Let's try that again. There we go. So there we go. Photography by committee. So kind of before, nothing too interesting, quite low contrast, loads of other stuff going on around it. And actually something that's reasonably interesting again at the end. I'm not going to go through this anymore, but I would probably, let me get my drawing tool back on. I would probably darken this down. And I think in the image I edited, I used the healing tool to get rid of all these tiny spots all the way around, so that it was a really sharp, I think got rid of that one as well. So it was a really tight image, and that there wasn't any kind of huge distraction all the way around. But again, just minutes editing, went into a competition and sort of did relatively well in comparative terms.
You could crop the top down now.
Sorry?
Crop the top down, make it into a landscape format.
Yeah, you could. It's the thing, Trev. You could just go back through and you know, in any number of ways. Really. So one of the ones I was really sort of keen on showing was actually one of the opening pictures. So it was this one, and it's quite difficult to sort of see that picture came from this, because there's so much going on all the way around. But when I took this picture, I mean, this was a labour of love. I will say that mobile phone photography or not, you know, you've got to be dedicated to these things. And I focused on that stairwell and waited, I'm not sure how long I waited, 5 or 10 minutes until someone came up and I took that picture. But then someone appeared at the top and I thought, no, wouldn't that be great if someone else came up while they're at the top, you know? And so I kind of waited a little bit longer and got this. But it's the exact same principle. So kind of global edits first and foremost. So looking at perspective is where you really need that extra space all the way around. Just auto perspective, nearly right, not quite right, but nearly right. So look at free. I'm only going to do this really quickly. In fact, no, I'll tell you what, I'll rotate it first. Go back, rotate it first and try that. Oh no, it's relatively straight at the top. Let's go back to that perspective again. Okay, so it looks like that top right hand side is a little bit skew. So I'll just bring that down to be relatively straight. I'm looking all the way around and there's a bit of a twist over there as well. I'm not left-handed, I'm trying my best. Okay, so I mean, it does disastrous things to the rest of the image, but it doesn't really matter because I've got all the space all the way around it. So that's kind of what I would do from that side of things. At the bottom of this image, you'll see that there's a repeating pattern. And I was really chewing as to whether to get rid of that repeating pattern. And in the end, I left it in. It's actually the bottom of the glass on the viewing gallery. So in the end, I left it in because I thought the picture was interesting enough that you wouldn't necessarily see it. You know, you wouldn't necessarily see all the flaws and things that are wrong with this image. So again, back to really, really simple edits. I want to make sure that his t-shirt isn't too bright and that the concrete isn't too bright because the concrete with the texture looks really fascinating. So up to highlights, drop that down, just brings out all of that really interesting texture in the concrete, or brings out some of the interesting texture. The shadows, I didn't play too much with the shadows because I really like the difference between light and dark, but I'll just pull that out just a little bit so you can see that there's something coming up from the sort of staircase there. But I think what kind of wins it here is the crop itself, because as soon as you manipulate what people can see, and as soon as you take everything else out of the image, it just becomes really interesting, and it's almost like a sort of a comparison between two situations. You've got depth and a sort of a set level, which I find really interesting to go through. And then again, I would probably not added too much clarity because this is a really grainy image, and I think if I go over the top on clarity, then it starts to look really quite manufactured. So I would probably just edge it up just a tiny amount until it's getting to that point. And although this isn't a really colourful image anyway, I would probably just desaturate it a little bit there as well, just to sort of take that tone down. Alternatively, because we've got those yellow areas around the staircase or the stairwell, I could also use a brush, go onto the brush and reduce the saturation of those areas by using a specific brush. So just rub over it a little bit on the top right hand side, rub over it a little bit on the bottom left hand side, just to sort of desaturate that and give it a more monochromatic look. I didn't do that the first time, but I think that works much more the second time around. And interestingly, because the sort of focus has changed, the crop has changed the focus, you don't look so much at the bottom. You know, you don't see those repeating patterns quite so much. And this was really sort of appealing to me. So Emma's just sent a message. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So sorry, if you're not reading the chat, Emma's just said something really, really, really interesting. So the man in the van That should have been the title. The man in the van was cropped beyond context. So because you couldn't see him in the van, it lost the meaning. Really good point, actually. And perhaps this is cropped too much, so you lose the meaning. I don't know. I think maybe, maybe I do go over the top with my crops a little bit. But I've learned to not to be sort of too afraid of the crops with mobile phones. But thanks very much, Emma. Really good point. And if you can't tell the story, maybe it is too much. And again, quick before and after. And I suppose I always say to people, if you just add, it detracts. And I think this does make it a significantly sort of more interesting picture than when I first started. And again, how long is that? That's taken 3.5, 4 minutes, start to finish. So it's just that kind of sort of rapid nature of it. Doesn't work for everything though. So let me pick one that doesn't necessarily work that well. I do agree with what Emma was saying on the context. So let's look for something else. Okay, there are some people that look like they're naked there, but they are wearing clothes. I'll just let you know. So this one, I've looked at this image time and time and time again, and I've edited it absolutely loads of times. It was exactly the same sort of spot that the other one was on. And this is an example of mobile phone photography gone, a bit crap. I can't get this image to work, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of images that I keep and look back on and think, okay, can I change this? Can I edit this? And I've tried to crop it sort of in what I would consider to be a relatively interesting way, whereby we've got a direct comparison between the two, maybe even try to sort of some rotation as well, so it's a little bit more dynamic with the angle of things. I've done it in black and white, I've done it in colour, I've done it high contrast, low contrast, all kinds of different things, but this image still doesn't work for me. And the reason I'm showing it to you, I think the reason it doesn't work is probably because she's got her eyes closed, but the reason I'm showing it to you is that I worked out that this image didn't work while I was there. So I did it quickly because I thought this. I actually took this picture before the stairwell one. I thought this is going to be a fantastic picture, and I spent 5 minutes taking the picture, edited it, realized it wasn't going to work, or I couldn't make it work with my limited skill, abandoned it, and then went and took the stairwell picture. And I kind of don't do that when I'm using my proper camera. I kind of sit there and take pictures because I'm sure that by the time I get home, I'll make something from it. But yeah, it doesn't always work.
Mark?
Yeah.
I think you're being distracted by the girl looking up.
Okay.
If you just crop it to the grey area, you've got a picture.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say that
Mark, my view on that is that it's two different pictures. The two are not connected. So whilst I agree with the other speaker, cropping the grey to keep that bit in, I think there's a picture for the girl and isolating her on her own.
So essentially I could take two from this then, in that instance. Yeah, thank you. It's why I thought I'd bring these to the table. I think it's really interesting. Actually, I would love, if we could share some images, I'd love to do a before and after. As I've sort of shown tonight, I think it'd be great if we sort of said, this is what I started with and this is what I came up with at the end. I think that would be really fascinating. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, keep going.
I suggested in the chat that your man and van picture, for those that want to, you email it to us and we edit it as we like and then put it into Facebook or something so you can see different people's interpretations.
Absolutely. And if anybody else would like to do that as well, that would be, not just my pictures. If anybody else would like to send me their images and you're happy for me to do that, then we can upload them and we can sort of get some group editing going on. I'm actually going to, once I finish this, I'm going to try 2 or 3 of the things that people have spoken about tonight, because this is the richness of this, isn't it, to get different perspectives on. But that would be great. Yeah, if people wouldn't mind doing that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I love a challenge, me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Looking at my photography, I love a challenge. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much.
I don't mean it like that.
No, it's fine. No, I'm here to be insulted. It's all right.
Mark?
Yes.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, please keep going.
What did you see in this picture that made you want to take it when there isn't the connection between the 2 people on the railing, because they're just chatting away, and this other woman who's got her eyes closed? What did you see in it that made you think, because there's 3 people there but nothing's being connected?
I suppose, really good question. And in my mind, I saw if she was to get a little bit closer, sort of there-ish, and if she continued to look up as she was, I thought there may be some kind of connection. But actually, it's a really good question. And I think another reason that this doesn't work is the phone was so slow to respond that I got an image of her before she got there, and then an image once she'd already walked under, and I actually missed what I considered to be the image that was kind of worth taking.
So with the iPhone, what sort of speed does it, what is its speed? You can't sort of, you can't change it in an iPhone, can you? It just does its thing?
You can on some programs. So on mine, I can change the shutter speed. As soon as I change the shutter speed to sort of street speed, which is kind of 250th around there upwards, it really puts the ISO up, so generates quite a lot of grain. So I very rarely adjust anything, and this is the time when adjusting it would have worked. But there are some apps where you can take a lot more control over what your camera's doing, so you can just take it out of an auto mode and actually run it as you would a normal.
Thank you.
No, really interesting. But yeah, great challenge.
When I saw that photograph first, I thought the two women. In fact, I saw the two women first, pointing at her. That's what I saw first.
Yeah.
So that the connection was there.
Thank you. And
if I'd in Photoshop do a little bit of puppet warp on her finger, make it more pointy.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and then you could have your title could be, look at that skinny bitch.
Yeah.
Or something.
I'd have to put an asterisk there. Can't do with that sort of thing.
If we're going to go that far, why not replace her closed eyes with open eyes?
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to bring it back, guys, because this is on Snapseed. So I will just say we may be slightly limited to what we can do. But I am genuinely quite happy to let people go for it. Absolutely, quite happy to let people go for it. Thanks very much, Trev, for being furiously working away in the background. So Trev's just put the name of some software you can use to actually manipulate your phone to sort of get some more control. Thanks very much for that, Trev. And so, I mean, I suppose I'm going to do one more, and I do a lot of kind of interesting, well, what I consider to be kind of interesting documentary shots or stuff that really sort of grabs my attention. And this just to show you, this is what that vertical kind of shot looked like in the shopping centre. And so this is just an eating area at Blue Water. Just put my phone over the edge, took a couple of pictures. I won't go through editing it now because we're a bit tight on time, but that's kind of that was quite a good competition score as well. Really noisy, really noisy again, but there's enough space all the way around that once you start to rotate and change the perspective and so on, you actually don't end up with a great deal of space left to correct everything. But I didn't go down and give them the picture afterwards. But I will say, again, talking about sort of the immediacy of it, once I'd taken that photograph, I turned over the other side and saw this one. And this picture screamed to me, okay? There's so much mess going on in this picture. I mean, it's absolutely hectic, chaotic, but this picture just absolutely screams to me. So I went from there with my mobile to there, okay? I'm not going to ask you for, information on what you think I'm going to do. It's probably going to be really quite basic. Instant perspective adjustment. This is where you lose all that massive amount of space around, and you need all of that space in order that when you start to manipulate it, you're not affecting too much. So essentially, I'm really only using about a quarter of the image here, and that's kind of what I was really interested in. So quick perspective adjustment on that one. Quick rotation on it. Probably not too much of a rotation though, to be honest. I just want to sort of line the cushions up a little bit as best I can. Probably kind of there. My eyes are a bit tired, but probably kind of there. Quick bit of cropping. Square crop works, well, usually works really well. I've got her foot in, so I might have to shrink that down a little bit or try and heel her foot out of the way. That's ironic. Heel her foot. Anybody get it? Sorry. Heel her foot out of the way. I make those jokes in lectures as well, and nobody laughs. I'm quite used to it. So, go on, sorry, someone said something.
It's late in the evening.
It is, sorry, Trev, you're right. I do make those jokes at 9 o'clock in the morning usually. Now, I know, looking at this, there's still some things that are wrong. So I know the lines are still wonky on that left-hand side. I would probably spend more time lining this up. In fact, I did. I've entered this to a competition, spend a little bit more time lining this up. And also, there are a couple of things that really irritated me on this image. So if I just look at healing again, zoom right in, and I think, what did I do? Yes, it was this bit of text here. So I just got rid of that sort of little bit of text there. There are a couple of scratches. Oh, that corner as well. Get rid of that corner. Ah, come on. Oh, come on. Here we go. It's going to work. There we go. What else did I look at? I'm not going to line it up perfectly, but it can be done quite easily. And I kind of went backwards and forwards about getting rid of this wavy line in the top. I think I did actually get rid of it in the end on with the clone tool, just to sort of shift that out. And then it's back through the same process. Nothing amazing. I like high contrast. Black and white, because it just absolutely bursts when we look at these kind of images in black and white. I didn't bring up the shadows too much because I wanted a localized adjustment on the chap on his phone. So I wanted to get back on that one. I'm gonna have to rotate it a little bit more. It is irritating me. There we go. Back on a brush again. Zoom in. Let's have a look on a little bit of exposure. I know there's a better option than this, by the way. A little bit of exposure. Whoops, not that much. Try that again. So a little bit of exposure on his back, just to bring out a little bit of detail there. So on.
Mark?
Yes.
Do you find it, there are some of those special pens that some people use to do their typing. Do you ever use that, like a sort of a tablet thing?
No, or pencil. Doesn't work.
One of those that has a soft tip or something, and some people use those. Yeah. Do you ever use that for your editing, or your fingers?
I always use fingers, because you can zoom in so much that actually your finger becomes sort of 4 or 5 pixels across. So you don't.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you don't need to. Yeah. I mean, I've got a Wacom tablet and a graphics tablet and things for when I'm doing stuff on Photoshop. I don't use it anymore. But when you can zoom in so much, I just use my finger. And again, you know, I'll probably finish on this one if that's all right. I don't want to keep you here all night. I really could easily. But quick sort of before and after, that's the shot I saw. And I just kind of visualized those cushions in the middle. They were going to be splendid and fantastic, and life was going to be wonderful. And I wasn't concerned with how bent it was or twisted or anything like that, because I knew there was enough space all the way around it. The only thing I did wait for was enough people to be sort of out of the way. And I made my peace with that woman's foot, because I figured she'd be in there in some way. And I took 4 or 5 shots of this, and this guy was gone in an instant, so I never went back. And 5 minutes later, maybe 10, not sure, we haven't been here long, 5 or 10 minutes later, I got an image that I felt was worth going there for sort of competition. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now, because I've spoken at you absolutely loads. I couldn't find that image that I wanted to find and re-edit for the stairwell, by the way. It's obviously on my phone and not on my iPad, because I've spread some images across. So whoever said that, I think 3 people sort of gave me different opinions on that. I've recorded this, so I'll watch it back, and I'll put that on the Facebook group as well, just to sort of get some opinions. But I hope it's been useful. I really enjoyed talking through it and getting people's opinions. But I hope it's been useful to sort of come and see kind of, not necessarily different approaches, but how just even taking your phone and editing it on your phone can be really powerful. I find it absolutely exhilarating, because I know I've got something, and I know I've got something that's of value sort of before I go anywhere. And I just think it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to end it there, guys, but I just want to say thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, please, I'll email you a link out with feedback. I always do. I'll email you a link out with feedback, and I'll put a link onto a Facebook group, and I'll put my picture on there, and Pat can butcher it. Simon can add googly eyes. You know, you can do anything you like to it, and we'll see if we can get some feedback. But thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. And if there's any questions, I'm not going anywhere, so I'll hang around. Please, any questions? What? What do you?
Fantastic, Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Coming.
Thank you very much.
There as well. Hi, Graham.
Hi. Sorry, I've been here all night.
I didn't see you there, Graham. Sorry.
It's all right. I've been around.
Really nice meeting everybody again. And sorry for the spelling mistakes in the emails. Do look out for them. You do save £2.50 every time you find one. It's quite handy.
So he says.
Yeah, so he says.
So much.
I have actually entered some mobile phone pictures into competitions myself, but I have edited them in Photoshop. Although I've got Snapseed, but I find I like my Wacom tablet and the pen tool, and it's using a big fat finger on a little tiny screen, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is for me, I suppose it's the available time, and I knew that I wasn't enjoying the editing of it, and that's kind of half the battle for me. And because I wasn't enjoying the editing, I wasn't taking the pictures because I knew I had to edit, and so that's why it worked really well for me. But yeah, and also some of the members of my club. So if you're local, I'm from Faversham Camera Club, and we've got Sittingbourne Camera Club, Folkestone Camera Club in here as well. Got a few different people, but lots of people in camera clubs use, Lightroom on their mobile and all kinds of different editing techniques. I just use Snapseed because it's easy and sort of simple.
Does anybody use Affinity?
Oh, don't know.
yes, all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that Affinity on your mobile, by the way? Can you get Affinity on your mobile?
Can.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Oh, I might try that.
But Snapseed's easier on a mobile. But once you get into Affinity, it's like having Lightroom and Photoshop, but easier.
There's a really good tutorial by an ex-teacher of secondary school kids. So he breaks it down brilliantly. David Straker on YouTube.
I'll write that down. Hang on, David Straker.
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, you know what? I forgot. I will just show this before we finish because I did. Sorry, I'm going to have to indulge me a little bit. But I did my lockdown photography, and I went out every day to document what was happening. Only in Faversham, really, so nothing sort of special. And this one picture just really cracked me up. As photographers, you'll really enjoy this. Just one picture just absolutely cracked me up. As my screen share. And I would never have poked my camera in this person's house. Just let you know. But top left-hand side.
No blue rolls left in this town overnight.
But that isn't the best. The top left.
Oh, that's brilliant.
No visitors, don't want to catch nothing.
They spelled nothing wrong, isn't it? Nufin.
But absolutely.
It's just saying what we're all thinking.
But I think it's just. I mean, I did so much photography during that period, and all just documenting it. Really fascinating stuff. I hope we've all done. We've all tried.
Yeah, I think it's very important because we'll look back and this is a whole year of completely different pictures, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you never would have thought at Christmas we'd be doing this, wearing masks and all these new words we've learned, like social distancing and furlough. What's furlough? I never heard of it.
I thought that's what horses done when they run.
Yeah.
Furlough.
I kept spelling it wrong as well.
And all the phrases that COVIDiot and it's very, very strange, but yeah, definitely I've taken loads of pictures. I think it's really important. That's a whole, even you should take pictures regardless of COVID, shouldn't you? Because your high street's changing all the time. They're converting buildings to flats and knocking things down, and before you know it, you've lived somewhere for 20 years and then it looks completely different, isn't it? So it's always good to take pictures. So
if I can find a documentary, I will do, because someone, sorry, I know this is total conjecture now, but someone went down the shipyards in Glasgow when they were due for demolition. So they've been earmarked for closure in 4 or 5 years. And he went down and recorded the sounds that come out of the shipyards. Okay? So he walked all the way up and down the Clydebank or wherever it was for weeks. and recorded them. And 5 years later, those buildings were closed. 20 years later, they were knocked down. 50 years later, they're luxury flats.
Yeah.
That sound will never be heard again in human existence.
Right, yeah.
But he recorded it, you know.
Yeah.
And I imagine someone saying to him, "What are you doing? You know, what a waste of time that is." But it's valuable, isn't it? Still valuable.
Just going back to Affinity, if anyone wants it, there's a thing online, ePhotoZine. They do it for 24 quid.
Okay.
They give you 50% off. And the good thing about it is it updates about once a month. You get a new camera, say these new Canon R5s, they got the codes already for them.
Yeah.
So, Photoshop haven't got it. That's the other advantage.
Well, in that case, Trev, we'll organise you with a talk and you can talk us through Affinity.
Pete knows more about it than me.
I can't talk.
Okay.
Well, Mark, I've got to go now, but it's been interesting. I'm not saying I'm particularly sold because maybe I'm a dinosaur. When I can speak to you with my camera, I'll take a picture of you with my phone. Okay. But it was an interesting evening and enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mick.
Yeah, I'm off too. So thanks very much, Mark. Thanks for the
welcome.
invitations, and don't forget to email that picture out, and I'll be.
I'm scared.
I'll be get onto it on Photoshop.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a bit worried.
Good night, all.
Thanks very much, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks again,
Thank you
Mark.
very much. Bye.
See you later.